It's like waiting for the weak one to get off the canvas and come back up fighting. This is rubbish that they use on us. But anyway, then of course, 2 days later, the Bank of Canada, which is just a meeting ground where an appointed guy by the government meets the guys we borrow from. That's what they call the Bank of Canada. They slashed the Canadian dollar, or actually they made it less strong, made it weaker, so that we could get a bit more exports out of the country. Because all we've got left now is raw materials, you see. Most of the factories have all gone. We've got mines left though. As long as China wants the ore, which goes past my house every day, I guess I'll keep the country maybe afloat. But in reality, as I say, they brought the strength of the Canadian dollar down because it's just too strong. Once it's strong, they don't want to buy anything from you. It's too expensive, you see. So you can't win. You understand? The whole point is you can't win unless you're the boys that are running it all. They know what they're going to do with the cash. And believe you me, they scurried away long before you even get wind of what's going on. Anyway, it seems to work in Canada during the country's mid-1990s campaign to slash deficits. And there are many other such examples cited by some economists. But they involve countries where growth was strong or where it was supported by factors like falling interest rates, sharp currency devaluation, or rapid growth among trading partners. You know, everything that's happened in my lifetime has been detrimental to the society. I've never known a country that's gone up and up and up, or even stayed pretty stable. It's always been deals made quietly by governments through international organizations. We don't elect them in, of course, to take all your factories away to China, for instance, and you're left, as I say, with nothing but raw resources to ship off to. And they call this a balance of trade, you know. I think the balance of trade with China, I don't think our scale, our side of the scale has ever moved off the ground. I mean, everything's coming in from China. You understand? We've never touched the ground, actually. Anyway, this is the rubbish they call economics, but it's all meant to control and benefit those who run money. That's the secret of it all. You see, people thousands of years ago wanted to be kings and queens. And I've gone through this before. And so what they did was, big guys would slaughter the guys near him, the families, and then eventually get a big following, you see. In some countries, this still happens today, in places like around Australia, New Guinea, etc., where they actually have a man in each tribe. It's called the big man. And the big man gets worshipped by all the little people, you see. And that's how it was a long time ago and thousands of years ago elsewhere as well. And so these big guys, they were kind of terrifying, big bullies, would become kings eventually. And the more guys who would follow them, the more they would plunder their people and steal what they had. But you see, there's other guys who came in and says, well, we don't want to do it that way. It's far easier to basically be the kings of money. Why bother with armies when everything needs money? And they became kings of money. That's basically what happened a long time ago. Hasn't changed today. And you're working really with the descendants of the same few people up to the present time running this thing called cash. And countries have been basically sold off in the past before and down through history because of usury, compound interest, and remember too, in some countries in the Middle Ages, usury could go up to 80% on interest, like it did in parts of Germany, which was not actually for Greater Germany then, but that's what happened in some of these countries. And we're still playing the same game today. And then you give this rubbish at school, tell the children, oh, you're all going to go out that starting line there with an equal chance. Then they give you equality and all that rubbish. Eh? A fair chance of getting up the ladder and having a good life. Utter rot. But anyway, thank God for all these guys with degrees in this thing called economics. Something that Rothschild himself said a long time ago. He says those that catch on to this big financial scam called money and usury and interest, etc., he says will not disclose it to the public because they'll be benefiting too much of it themselves to let it out the bag. And that's called economics today. So we know that these Wall Street protests are spreading as well. This is protests against the perceived excess of Wall Street spread further Tuesday with events in new cities as the populist groundswell enters its 18th day. I'd be interested in what comes out of all this because, you know, the big boys want to alter the cash system. into their world cash system. And it's all going down the way that Quigley pretty well predicted. And he should know, because Quigley was the historian, official historian for the Council on Foreign Relations that were set up by the big bankers in Britain under the name of Royal Institute of International Affairs a long time ago. And the Milner Group was comprised of the big bankers of London, the guys who did lend to nations and still do with their descendants. Anyway, it says here, on Monday, hundreds dressed as zombies and lurched past the New York Stock Exchange clutching fistfuls of fake money. In Chicago, demonstrators pounded drums in the city's financial district. Others pitched tents or waved protest signs at passing cars in Boston, St. Louis, Kansas City, Minnesota, and Los Angeles. Downtown Boston saw hundreds of demonstrators march from a tent city on a grassy plot in downtown towards the State House, calling for an end of corporate influence of government. Well, government and corporate interests are tied at the hip, if not one and the same thing today, to be honest with you. They're one and the same thing today. And some heavy thinking has to go into that. So remember too, that according to the guys who set up this part of the agenda that we're living through today, many of them died before the 1960s, but they set up the global institutions for this very time that we're living through today, with the cultural changes, including the financial changes too. Also talked about setting up the Bank for International Settlements, which they did actually a long, long time ago. And the Bank for International Settlements works with the World Bank and the IMF, and it's based in Switzerland, of course. And it is to become this real broker for all defunct countries. That was its function when it was set up a long, long, long time ago. I think even back in the 30s. And Carol Quigley, on behalf of the Council on Foreign Relations, said this, through financial crisis, etc., they will bring all the central banks together under this one system, which is exactly what those who own the central banks want. You see, they're private banks. That's what they are, central banks. They're private banks. And they've ought to go under the Bank for International Settlements. I'll put up a link tonight for it too, and you can have a gander at it yourself. It says the Bank for International Settlements is an intergovernmental organization of central banks. Isn't that interesting? All the ones that are claiming, oh my God, we're just hanging on right now. So they're an international organization of central banks which fosters international monetary and financial cooperation and serves as a bank for central banks. It serves as a bank for central banks. So technically, your central banks are borrowing from this other big Bank of International Settlements. It said it is not accountable to any national government. It's totally private, you see. The Bank of International Settlements carries out its work through subcommittees, the secretariats it hosts, and through its annual general meeting of all members. It also provides banking services, but only to central banks. See, not to little old you or me, or to international organizations like itself. Based in Basel, Switzerland, the BIS was established by the Hague Agreements of 1930. The name of the BIS in German, and it gives you it there in French as well, and in Italian, and has representatives' offices in Hong Kong and Mexico City. But it's got a whole list of links coming off of this one particular site, and I'll put it up tonight. Because, see, that's the big one. This is the big one. This is how it's supposed to happen. That's what Quigley said. The central banks will all eventually merge. They're already using this one BIS, Bank of International Settlements, and have been since the 1930s. They'll merge into one super global system, as we all lose our countries anyway. If you haven't noticed, have a look at Europe. It used to be a conglomerate of separate sovereign nations. It's all gone. And the same thing's to happen to the Americas. And of course, in the Council on Foreign Relations over on this side has said over the last few big crashes and the terrorist nonsense and so on, that this is good for integration of the Americas, both financial crisis and under the guise of terrorism, to merge together. Same with all the Pacific Rim region. And you also got the same thing happening with Russia. Putin is putting forward his idea. It's not his idea at all. For a unification of all the old Soviet countries into a bloc. But then they'll merge it eventually with Europe down the road. So everything's worked out long before you were born, And we're just going through the phases now to put it into action. Also, too, I want to mention tonight, I mentioned last week, I think it was, about how people in Africa, in certain areas, were being burned off their land. They're being killed at times, too, because the World Bank, this wonderful United Nations World Bank that really is a private group that belongs, again, to the BIS, that last group I mentioned. They're the big players in global government. Are really, they've got their own private investment group in there with their strongmen, and it's the strongmen that are kicking the guys off the land because they own the United Nations, you see, this BIS, and they want that land for carbon sinks. Big money in it, all your tax money. Back with more after this break. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, talking about this carbon scam. And you understand the United Nations has got all these big international corporations in bed with them. Stop thinking of the UN as this wonderful group that hands candy bars across the world. It's so Orwellian. They call them peacekeepers. They send in, soldiers are called peacekeepers. They're not killers anymore. They're peacekeepers. And it's all Orwell speak, basically. But anyway, this carbon con, they're already kicking folk off their land in Africa, across Africa, because you see there's big money to be had in planting a few trees or taking over existing trees and calling them carbon sinks, and then taxpayers end up just throwing money at you via your government for holding these carbon sinks, you see. This is the Wizard of Oz we're in now, you understand? You have to learn a whole new way of thinking, where anything's possible, and completely unbelievable becomes completely believable, and that's what you got to understand to do with climate change. Once you've got that, you'll understand all of it, and you'll be utterly insane. But anyway, the deaths of 23 Honduran farmers involved in land disputes with the UN-approved palm oil plantations are raising an international outcry against alleged human rights abuses. Euroactive reports members of the European Parliament planning to investigate mission to Honduras this month, while others are calling for a ban on carbon credits to the plantations under the EU's emissions trading system. Additionally, it says the UN Clean Development Mechanism is weighing its validation process, which originally accredited the plantations, a process critics call only rudimentary, completely unregulated and badly documented. Utter rubbish. The fact is, the UN's giving out carbon credits to their big pals of international corporations, including the World Bank, and unfortunately there's folk living on the land, and they want them off. So they kill them off, burn them off, or whatever it takes. They even hiring in international security people and special forces, the mercenaries, to kill them. That's what they're doing. This is the real world, folks, Protests erupted in July when 6 international human rights advocacy groups presented a report to the EP detailing what they called murders and forced evictions of peasants in El Bajo, Aguan Valley of northern Honduras. The International Federation of Human Rights report accuses United Nations-sanctioned palm oil mills of stealing farmland from Honduran natives and killing or wounding them when they attempt to defend their property. It says the companies acting with government impunity regularly target members of local land rights movements who end up murdered in feigned car accidents or hunted down and shot by private security guards. They're flying the mercenaries in. So much. You're riding on millions and billions of dollars worldwide if you can grab the right land. And you do nothing with it. You just stroll, have parties and stuff, and it absorbs the carbon. That's what they tell you. And you'll be able to get big grants given for helping save the world because the trees absorb the carbon, we're told, you see. What a great deal. Money for nothing, eh? Money for nothing. Examples of the violence are gruesome. Security guards ambushed a 15-year-old Rodrigo Omar Villegas near his village and shot him to death with an AK-47. Car run down and killed a 60-year-old Juan Ramon Mejia, and Jose Leonel Guerra Alvarez was murdered inside his home in front of his wife and children by armed assailants firing from outside the house. Reporting for Euroactive, Arthur Nelson asked a CDM board member about the approval of companies which employ such violent tactics. We are not investigators of crimes, reported the United Nations official. We just cause them. I did the last part. They didn't say we cause them. No, they would never admit to that. He explained the CDM's purpose is to award companies in developing countries with emission reduction credits. That's freebies, folks. They hand out millions of dollars in freebies for land if you can get the peasants off them. And it's all yours. Mine, money. You see, that's it. Yeah. That's what runs the world, folks. We need a new system, eh? Well, from Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, Let's good night. May your God or your gods go with you. Remember, buy the books and discs, and hopefully I'll tickle along while there's still some money out there.